What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor season 44 for the last time in this season, the finale episode. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and if you guys are feeling a little bit of deja vu, maybe it's because you saw us last night on the Nullified Takes podcast where we got to talk with Chris and Jake about the finale episode. And so, if you guys are interested in hearing what we had to say there and also what other people had to say about the finale, feel free to look at the link down in the description below because we had a great time talking with them. But, you can never talk too much about a good finale.
Exactly. So today we're back talking finale again. We are going to be full tilt boogie here. Jeff is trying to make this catchphrase happen where he named an episode Full Tilt Boogie comes up again here in the finale. So I don't know. I'm like, okay, at first it was a little bit weird. Jeff, it's not fetch, it's not going to happen. But now I'm like, okay, it's sort of funny, ironic to say it.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, what are you even going for here, Jeffrey? Like, I feel like there are better ways to say full tilt boogie than full tilt boogie, but who
We're
knows?
going to FTB. Let's make some little t-shirts. FTB.
Yeah, because that could not be misinterpreted, whatever.
Exactly. Make it just so weird. No one understands but Survivor players and Survivor watchers. So we start off this finale episode. Everyone is out there looking for an idol because Heidi just played an idol last episode. So they're all thinking, okay, maybe something is rehidden. Heidi basically says, yeah, I would rather play it now rather than not play it and then go home, which we said last week. We are like, okay, you would have been flamed on the internet if you ended up not playing it and getting voted out with an idol. So you bet on yourself and you can hopefully find another one. It makes sense, even though she didn't need to play it last week.
Yeah, she didn't need to play it last week. I also feel like idols at Final Five is kind of like, come on. I feel like Final Six should be the last time you should be able to play an idol.
I agree. I am sort of glad that nobody found the idol, or maybe it wasn't an idol and it was just an advantage because to have something, say it was an idol, Final Five is the only time to play it. So it's basically like a safety card, get out of jail free card. Whoever found it is probably just going to automatically play it. Where if someone found it like Lauren, who's going to get voted out, that would change the game drastically compared to someone who maybe wasn't on the chopping block. Doesn't really matter if they're safe or not, or they find an idol or not this week because they weren't going to get voted out. So I really am glad that no one found it because it just is annoying to have something hidden when there's only one time to play it.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of, I feel like people were off looking for the idol instead of like talking strategy or like, making connections with each other. And that's kind of, excuse me, that's the interesting part of Survivor to me, seeing how someone can like navigate out of a tricky situation without an idol. So, mm,
Exactly. So nobody found this little piece of paper in the tree. I do wonder, watching it back now, are they like, oh, dang, it was literally right there. We missed it. We were walking by it. They showed the shots where the person's in frame and then it goes like, ding, the thing is right there. I do wonder though, was it an advantage or an idol? Because I feel like in the new era, we've seen these like word scrambles happen in the finale, then they get an advantage for the next immunity challenge. We didn't see a word scramble happen this episode, so maybe this was in lieu of that scramble.
yeah, maybe the advantage was a word scramble and you still had to solve the word scramble. But I feel like advantage over idol in Final Five, definitely for sure. But also, I wonder what it would have been.
Yeah, I guess we'll never know. Word scrambles in the future. They should have full tilt boogie as a word scramble, or for those word puzzles, it should be full tilt boogie.
No.
So we get to this first immunity challenge. They have to race through obstacles to get keys, use a pole to get a key, and then there's a puzzle at the end. The winner wins immunity, and then they also get to go to the sanctuary where another Jeff catchphrase he's trying to make happen. He says, where good things happen.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like the slogan for a restaurant or a hotel and not like a Survivor thing. So that was a little questionable. Also, like the way he said the sanctuary, it would like I was a little scared.
Sounds so inappropriate. Like, where good things happen. Like he's trying out these new catchphrases. It's sort of odd.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's trying out new catchphrases, but you know, Jeff, if it makes you happy, I guess it makes you happy.
Yeah, like pre-merge, he keeps on saying sorry for you when he takes people's flint after they lose challenges. Post merge, sanctuary where good things happen, everyone's going full tilt boogie. Just sort of funny. But I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I don't know about this one either. So maybe he'll listen to people and say, um, not start doing it.
So this challenge was carrot cake versus chocolate cake. Alyssa, do you have a preference?
Chocolate cake, carrot cake kind of freaks me out.
Oh, I like both. They had some good carrot cake at the dorm dining hall in college, so I would always get that. But I feel like chocolate cake, if it's too sweet, then maybe you'd want a carrot cake, but I'd want both.
Yeah, I thought it was sweet how Carolyn knew. Like Carolyn was like, "Oh, that's your favorite." When Jeff mentioned carrot cake, I was like, "That's just sweet. It's sweet to see that these people like are actually friends." So
Mhm. Speaking of Carolyn, she is at that key pole part of the challenge. It reminded me of the first challenge in the premiere episode with the rings and the tall pole. She couldn't get the ring off the pole, and then she took off her pants in order to get like better leverage in her legs to try to shoot the ring off the pole. Reminded me of that here. We need that compilation of Carolyn doing Carolyn things
I
on
thought that
YouTube.
exact same thing. I was like, "We've already proven that Carolyn is not very good at this, like a portion of the challenge." But you know, I hope that um I wonder if it's like her arms are too short. Like, what's going on that makes that so difficult for her?
But it is cute though. I feel like a theme, especially with Final Tribal and Carolyn in challenges, she just said, like, yeah, I expected more from myself. My son said, I hope you're doing well at challenges. She thought she was letting her son down because of that, because she wasn't performing in challenges. And then here in this challenge, she's like, yeah, Jeff, I just wanted to make it to the puzzle portion. She puts one piece in the puzzle and it was like, yeah, I'm accomplished. This feels good.
Yeah, I feel like whenever there's a puzzle, also, you kind of just got to expect that Carson is going to win it because you know that he's been practicing these puzzles. So it's like, if even if you get to the puzzle portion when she was already so far behind and going against someone who's a better puzzle maker than her, it's kind of like, why even bother?
I wonder if Carson practiced this puzzle. I feel like even not this specific exact one that you 3D print, just practicing like that fire tree puzzle that he won earlier this season, the 3D puzzles probably helps. As Alyssa and I know, doing Russell Muscle TV's fire puzzle, that is a 3D puzzle. It's difficult if you haven't really done 3D puzzles before because Survivor, you're not allowed to put the pieces on the ground. That's why Kirsten was like carrying 10 million things at once. Just, I feel like 3D puzzles, it's such a way of thinking, visualizing. These kinds of puzzles are difficult. So even if you didn't practice this one specifically, just practicing that genre of puzzle in general, I think would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I feel like just kind of knowing how to think about it makes it so much easier.
Exactly. So we see Carson, he's making the outer edge of the puzzle first rather than building from the bottom to the top, which I thought was an interesting strategy. I guess, like, because you can see more ways of how the pieces can fit together. If you're trying to build bottom up, you can only see, okay, these edges at the bottom, do they match the bottom edge of the piece I have? Compared to if you create the outer edge first, you have more ways to match pieces. So I think that would probably be a pretty good strategy, even though Jeff kept on saying, oh, it's so hard to put the pieces in. He's going to knock the puzzle over.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like that's kind of the way that you're supposed to do flat 2D puzzles. Like you're supposed to start with the outside edge and then, you know, do the insides. So I wonder if that partially inspired Carson's strategy there.
So Carson wins, proud of him. He's just got such like endearing kid energy, even though we're only a few years older than him. It's 5 years. Yeah, I thought he was 22, but apparently he's like 20. I'm like, he just gives off young energy that you'd want to like coddle him.
Yeah, and I think that's something that kind of ended up being part of his downfall because everyone was like, "Oh, Carson's so likable that like everyone's going to want to bring him to the final 3 or like everyone at the final 3 is going to want to root for him, so I need to vote him out."
Exactly. So Carson, he picks Jam Jam to go to the sanctuary. We see how close Jam Jam and Carson are in this finale episode, which I think is very interesting because Tika 3, you're like, oh, maybe they're all equally close to each other. Who's closer to who in this 3? Maybe we were assuming that Carolyn and Jam Jam were closer because Carson was the person brought into the alliance second kind of thing. He was maybe going to go with Helen and Sarah in those early episodes, but now it does seem that Carson is like the middle one and he's closer to Carolyn and Jam Jam individually than maybe Carolyn and Jam Jam are to each other. So it is very fascinating to see, oh, he is that glue there. He's closer to each of them, sort of in like a three-person friend group. One person is usually closer to the other two than all three are to each other.
I do wonder though, part of that might have just been editing to make us like
Mm.
understand why Jam Jam was the one who won instead of Carolyn winning because I feel like this episode they kind of had to, I don't want to say they had to justify Jam Jam's win, but I feel like they had to make the average viewer understand like, okay, this is what Jam Jam and Carolyn did differently. This is why people would vote for Jam Jam instead of Carolyn. And so they kind of naturally had to show Jam Jam as being like better than Carolyn in some ways. So I feel like that might have also been part of why they showed Carson and Jam Jam as really close.
Yeah, and it does seem like Carson is close to both Carolyn and Jam Jam individually as well, with Carolyn playing the idol for him. And then later on this episode, which we'll talk about later, Jam Jam helping to teach him fire, compared to like the relationship between Carolyn and Jam Jam that we've seen, where people have said, "Oh, they're bickering like family, like brother, sister, husband, wife, something like that." Like even Lauren this episode was like, "Yeah, I can't really tell if they're faking it or if not because they're always fighting or fake fighting, as people say." So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you fake fight enough, certain little things in there are little bits of truth.
Yeah, I feel like you can't fake fight someone for 26 days and not have a little bit of truth in it, but also that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not still friends or that they don't still like love and care about each other. I think that the important part with Lauren's thing about like, oh, it's just like me and my sister is that, you know, you might still say hurtful things to people you love or who are your family, but that doesn't mean that you don't still love them.
Exactly. So we get to the sanctuary. Jim Jim brings up Carolyn's name again as the biggest threat. We need to vote Carolyn out, which is very interesting as well because in like exit interviews, Jam Jam is saying the reason he wanted Carolyn out is because they've worked so closely together. He saw Carolyn's mind, how intelligent Carolyn is, how good she is at strategy compared to everyone else. Maybe didn't work as close with her. They just see her as a kooky woman this season. Maybe they're underestimating her still. So it is very interesting. Like Jam Jam sees it and wants to vote her out, but other people don't necessarily see it, which then goes into final tribal later on. And being a zero vote finalist, technically Jam Jam didn't maybe need to worry about Carolyn so much because of her perception with everyone else on the jury, which is so fascinating how, like, the edit of a show, it makes us as viewers see, yeah, Carolyn's a huge threat. You maybe should vote her out compared to the perception of the people on the island not really seeing her as a threat.
Yeah, it is really interesting because I feel like that's something I think that would be an interesting final tribal council question for people. Like, which of the other final tribal council members, like, which of these other two are you genuinely worried about losing to? Because I
Mm.
feel like that would be an interesting way to see, like, the sides of other people who you didn't necessarily get to see or work with. and kind of get a better idea of, what's going on that you don't get to see. Because I do think it is kind of insulting that the person who the winner thought was the biggest threat got 0 votes at Final Tribal Council.
Yeah, it is just so fascinating. Like with the edit, viewers are like, yeah, Carolyn's so dangerous. People on the island, oh nah, she is too emotional. She is not playing the game, stuff like that. So good thing though, I guess Jam Jam didn't want to vote her out because he ends up winning against her at the end. So it's good maybe Carson didn't go with the plan and want to vote Carolyn out as well, because then it would have been harder for Jam Jam to win if Carson were still around. But the women back at camp while the men are at the sanctuary, they are potentially talking about voting Jam Jam out, which what we said last week, oh, Carolyn is probably going to realize that Jam Jam and Carson had to been the ones to put her name out there as the decoy vote for Jamie and Lauren to write down last tribal council. She realizes that and is a little bit angry about it. Hindsight, maybe for the women here as a winning move, they should have voted Jam Jam out at 5 rather than what they did. But yeah, we could talk about it.
I think that's interesting because I feel like Carolyn is kind of going to lose either way. Because I think if she had voted Jim Jim out here, it would have spoken poorly to like her social game, because it's like, this was my ride or die, and I like cut them loose at the last moment. I feel like that generally doesn't tend to work out for people, just because it kind of makes you seem wishy washy. It makes you seem like not a good alliance member, especially because they were so strong for the whole like season. And I think one of the interesting things about the Tika 3 this season was that a lot of times we don't see these strong alliances make it to the end. So I'm not sure. I feel like even if they had voted out Jam Jam here, I'm not sure it would have changed things for Carolyn.
I think I agree with that. I think for Carolyn, looking into the jury, she's probably like the fifth place person of winner chances. For us as a viewer, we all had her way higher than that. So I agree for Carolyn, it probably doesn't make a difference because she might lose to Lauren and Heidi as well if the three women are in the end or some kind of combination of them are in the end. But I feel like for Lauren and Heidi, they could have boosted their winner chances trying to get Jam Jam and Carson out as well. Because it does seem like, from the jury's eyes, Carson would get all the votes if he's there, and then Jam Jam maybe second, Lauren Heidi in the middle there, Carolyn last, depending on who's at Tribal, who would get those votes. So, because I feel like if Lauren Heidi made it to the end and they were maybe with Lauren, Heidi, Carolyn, Lauren or Heidi could have won because like all of the jury have they got like 4 votes on the jury that are their OG tribes, 3 votes on the jury, and then you have all the Tika members on the jury. I don't know. I think it would have been very fascinating to see.
You see, I think that's interesting because I think if Carson was at the final tribal, Jam Jam never would have gotten any votes. I think that people only voted for Jam Jam because they couldn't vote for Carson, and Jam Jam very much positioned himself as like, I was Carson's right hand. If you wanted to vote for Carson, you should vote for me because, we did everything together. So I think if Carolyn could have gone up against like Heidi and Lauren and then kind of positioned herself as like, I was the one, I was equally participating in this alliance with Carson and Jam Jam. I think that could be really interesting. I think if Carson and Jam Jam were on the jury and weren't like bitter jurors, it's also possible that they kind of like hype up Carolyn for her because they saw the game that she played. So I don't know. I think I'm contradicting what I just said about it might be bad for Carolyn to have Jam Jam on the jury, but you know, I think Jam Jam never would have won against Carson. I think that it was kind of, you are voting for one of the Tika 3, and then if you don't want to vote for one of the Tika 3, that's when you vote for somebody else. And I don't think that the initial tribe really had anything to do with it because Heidi only got 1 vote, and it wasn't, it's not like all of her original tribe members voted for Heidi. So I think, yeah. Does that make
I think
sense?
like Yeah, I think the original tribe members is what scares like Jam Jam Carson and Carolyn from turning on each other. So it's like, oh, we need to stick together because Lauren and Heidi have 3 votes already locked in the jury, which, like we saw, doesn't necessarily hold true because they didn't get those votes at the end. But I could definitely see it as a reasoning like, okay, we need to vote Lauren out at 5 because she's probably going to get Brandon's vote, Kane's vote, Jamie's vote because of her social game. So I could see like why they are wanting to vote Lauren out here, and the women aren't banding together here to vote Jam Jam out. I would say though, like for the Tika 3, because they don't have anyone on the jury from their OG tribe, it is all Tika. It is all the other 2 teams there. I would wonder for future seasons and just seasons in general, like you sort of want someone who can talk about your game in the jury, shed light on your game in the jury, and sort of boost you up rather than, okay, they're all sharing information there. We see how votes are being played out. It is very almost unanimous a lot of times because the jury talks and they're all sharing information. So if you don't have anyone who can talk about your game positively or who knows your game, inside out on the jury, I feel like that low key hurts you because they're like, "Oh, what is this person doing?" No one's been aligned with them. No one really knows truly what's going through their head compared to like, okay, Heidi has Danny. He goes out. Maybe Danny is talking her up in the jury because they've worked closely together. You're going to share information about your old alliance members. If you're not butthurt and bitter, you're going to talk your friends up. Like, it's a popularity contest at the end of the day. So I do wonder, like, would you want your teammates to go, whether you vote them out or not, so they go to the jury a little bit earlier so they can vouch for you in the jury?
I do also wonder if part of the reason why Jam Jam won is because Carson was more on Jam Jam's side than on Carolyn's side,
Mhm.
where it's kind of like Carson had to choose which one of the two of them to kind of vouch for and be like, this is the person I think should win, having worked with both of them. So it does
Exactly,
make
like
you think.
Carson wouldn't want the votes to be split between Carolyn and Jam Jam, so he would have to, like, stake his claim in one and, like, say all the good things about that one person he picks, you know?
Yeah, and there are some people who are speculating that like the reason why everyone voted for Jam Jam is basically because they were worried that Jam Jam and Carolyn were going to split the votes, and they really didn't want Heidi to win because they didn't think Heidi was a worthy winner. Kind of like what happened with Michelle Fitzgerald in Winners at War, where people were like, Michelle didn't deserve to be a 0 vote finalist, but I don't want Natalie to be the winner. So I will vote for someone else because, you know, where I would be interested in seeing ranked choice voting in the final tribal council, just because I do wonder if that would change how people vote.
Yeah, so we get to this first tribal council. Lauren gets voted out. She's saying that nobody talked to me about this plan. I was left out. So I guess it's interesting because as a viewer, we're like, yeah, no, the women talked to you. You're voting Jam Jam. But as a person on the island, she's feeling that the conversation she had didn't mean anything. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And she's feeling like, yeah, I'm going to be the one to go home, which is fascinating because you can talk to people, but their perception is that you're trying to trick them and you're giving them a fake plan.
Yeah, it's kind of like I wonder if it would have been easier for Lauren if Carolyn and Heidi just hadn't talked to her at all, because it seems like paranoia definitely got the best of her at the end.
So Lauren gets a full like 5 minute send off here, which is nice for her. Great, share your story, talk about what you've learned, stuff like that. But I don't know, these like final speeches at tribal council just feel so long now, and it sort of ruins the suspense, if there were any at this tribal council, of who's going to get voted out.
Yeah. It kind of feels like, oh, we know that it's going to be Lauren now, otherwise they wouldn't have given her this super long speech.
So the amount of times that Jeff says apply for Survivor during this episode, I was like, "What the heck?" Jeff, every single time this comes up, it is not an ad. We are playing the game. You don't need to bring it up in the middle of tribal council, in the middle of final tribal council. Like, keep the casting announcements to the commercial breaks. Don't bring it up in the show.
Yeah, it was so weird because I know that there are still tons of people applying to the show. Like, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I applied like 10 times and I haven't gotten picked yet. And it's like, I know that you're not hurting for actual applications. Why are you pushing this so hard?
It's just so weird. Like, not good people applying or what? You don't need to mention it 4 times in an episode. Like, chill. You're gonna make people not want to apply because you keep on bringing it up.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we go straight from tribal to the final immunity challenge. I guess low key, it would be cool to see them go back to camp first, but I guess it would be more of the same. Yay, we just survived tribal. Ah, we're the final four. I'm excited. I'm nervous. Nothing really happens until they do the final immunity challenge. So I guess it makes sense to jump straight from tribal to the next immunity, but it just feels sort of jarring. Like, oh, this is such a large time jump that we just did from last night to next challenge.
Yeah, it felt really weird. I wonder why. Like, I feel like they could have done something that wasn't just the whole like "yay we survived" thing, but I feel like also that's partially the fault of Fire, where it's like you don't know who you need to cozy up to until the final four challenge has been complete.
So maybe that's another bad thing about the fire making challenge, which we had a lot to say from the first time this fire making challenge started to now. Same things every single season, but that definitely it stunts the gameplay there. But get to this final immunity challenge. It is Samotion again, which great. Motion's fun. But I do feel like they need to change up the challenges. We set talked about this last night on the nullified take, where they have the similar challenges or the exact same challenges in the same spot every time in this new era of Survivor. So if you're really smart, if you're a super fan, you're going to do your homework, you could theoretically study, okay, the water challenge happens here. Motion happens at Final Four, and basically sort of practice or predict when these challenges are, sort of like last episode when they brought their entire camp to tribal council because they're thinking, yeah, we're going to be sent to a new beach. This is a theme that has happened in the new era thus far, or people strategizing around certain votes that might have twists. Like, oh, final 10 might be split, so we need to strategize and have our social game good that in a final 10 scenario, we won't be voted out. So, I don't know. I'm like, this motion's great, but I feel like they need to switch it up.
Yeah, I like Motion because it's an equal opportunity
Mhm.
thing. Like, you don't have to be super strong or super like good at puzzles in order to be good at Motion. But I do think that there are other challenges that they could do that aren't like just strength based that, would still fulfill the same kind of function.
Yeah, like Samotion's fairer because it's less athletic. Anyone can really do it compared to those huge obstacle course challenges, running up and down stairs. Other seasons of Survivor, specifically like Australian Survivor, they've done a Samotion variant, except you have to like go up and down stairs each time, and the ball goes down sort of like a pinball kind of machine, and you catch it at the bottom. That could be a good twist, although a little less fair if you're less athletic. But then you could say, okay, you're on the show, not everything's going to be fair. You get the cards that you're dealt if you can't do a challenge. Like they can't make everything 100% fair. So people are good at some things, bad at others. I would like to see the like final immunity challenge be endurance. Okay, standing on some spiky poles, keeping your hand above your head. Those anyone can do, and it's more about like brain and willpower rather than, athleticism.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's also, is it really good to be the one to win this challenge anymore? Just because I feel like there's this perception that if you do win the challenge, you should give up your immunity so that you can go into Final Four Fire. So it's interesting to see whether or not the Final Four challenge is it actually worth winning the immunity because there's like a chance that you're going to be safe anyway. So If you're really
Yeah,
good at fire, maybe it's not good for you to win this Final Four immunity challenge.
but actually though, I feel like the meta is you should vote yourself into fire if you win final immunity. That's what the jury says they want. Although, now maybe people won't want that because someone threw themselves into fire and they didn't end up winning the game. But I feel like winning final immunity nowadays, it's sort of like a damned if you do situation, damned if you don't. Like, oh, if you win, great. But then, like Cassidy last season, if you don't throw yourself into fire, they're like, oh, are you afraid? Are you weak? Why didn't you throw yourself in? You should have done that. Or damned if like you throw yourself in and you lose fire. Yeah, you just lost a ton of money because you could have been third place and get money for being third place, then fourth place. Or like here in Heidi's situation, you throw yourself in and sure, it's impressive. It's a ballsy move, but it's not a game-winning move, which here for Heidi, great for Heidi. Kudos for her for making this move, but I am glad that she didn't win the game just because of like one big thing like this. Like, sure, throwing yourself into fire once you've won immunity is really cool, but I don't think it should be a game-winning move.
Yeah, I feel like it should be the cherry on top rather than
Mhm.
the whole cake.
Exactly. Which it's like, okay, fire has such a big like weight put on it because it's the main thing that the jury sees right before final tribal council. It's flashy in front of the jury. The jury only sees you at tribal council. They're not seeing any other part of your games. So it does make sense that the jury might put more weight on it because it's something that they're seeing. But for me, okay, making fire 1v1 against another person isn't necessarily that impressive. Like, it shouldn't be a huge jury resume builder. It's like you beat one person in a challenge. It's not like you beat 10 people in fire.
Yeah. Mm, it is what it is, I guess.
But Jeff is saying that the jury might get to see challenges now. So then, if they are seeing challenges, then maybe fire has less weight because they're seeing more parts of people's games. Reminds me of Big Brother when people get sent to the jury and then they're like, oh, do you want to see what happened this week? And then they watch it on TV.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I like that because I think it's interesting how part of Final Tribal is just who can sell their story the best. But yeah,
So Heidi, she brings up after she wins immunity, yeah, Jeff, I might want to throw myself in. I feel like just saying that, you have to do it. Like if Heidi said that to Jeff and then Jeff brought it up at Tribal and then Heidi's like, actually, no thanks. I've thought about it, but I don't want to go in. That will definitely make you look scared and not good in front of the jury's eyes. Because if you say it, even if she had amazing reasoning for wanting to back out and not put herself into fire, the jury's just going to think like, yeah, you're scared and you backed out of doing this.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Why would you say that is my question because it's like do you really want people wondering? Like I feel like it would be so much of a cooler final move if everyone was like, okay, which two of us is she putting against each other and then actually she's throwing herself in. And I think that would also change, the scene between Jam Jam and Carson when he was like showing Carson how to make fire because I think he was kind of under the assumption like, yeah, it's going to be Heidi against Carson, but it would change Jam Jam's move if it was like genuinely Jam Jam thought he and Carson were going to be competing against each other.
Which good for Heidi. She's perceptive that she is being perceived as a non-winner right now. She knows she probably isn't winning the game at this point in time. So like good for her for realizing that and good for her for willing to risk it for the biscuit and like, okay, I don't think I'm going to win the game right now. The cards aren't in my favor. What else can I do in order to, bump the chances up a little bit? Might as well do something rather than sit back and be, a final three goats or just make it to the end. So this was the energy Heidi and Danny had with that Franny idol save, which we were both a big fan of. Like, you want to win the game. Don't just go with the flow, let things happen to you. We want people on this show who are willing to play hard, make that risky move, even if it means maybe not winning the game, but you're trying to better your chances of winning the game at the end of the day, which is what Heidi did here, even though it didn't work out for her. I feel like she deserves a lot of praise for realizing, yeah, I don't think I'm going to win. What can I do to change that? And doing something to try to change that.
She did not play to like lose, you know? Like she didn't play just to get to the furthest position that she could, you know?
So good for her. Heidi throws herself into fire. Very gutsy. Kudos from the jury for doing that. I do want to know, does Heidi know that Carson is bad at fire or not? Because I feel like this sort of changes your decision. Like, obviously, okay, they're saying Carson's the biggest threat, so she's going to pick the biggest threat to go up against fire with. It just also happens that Carson is the worst fire maker out of everyone else here. I think it'd be very, very interesting if someone who does win the individual immunity here, they choose someone who is the biggest threat, but also happens to be the best fire maker. Are people that gutsy to give up their chance at sitting at final tribal council to go against a really, really good fire maker or not?
Yeah, I don't know because Heidi says that she doesn't know how good at fire Carson is, but I'm like, I don't know if I believe that or not. And I wonder if it's just she knows that both Carolyn and Jam Jam are good at fire, and she's like, you know, of the three of them, I think Carson is the worst. I don't know. I don't know whether or not to believe her when she says that she doesn't know how good at fire Carson is.
Yeah, because she has a great reasoning. Yeah, Carson's so good at the game, he's gonna win, so I wanna go up against him. But say you did know that Carson can't do fire that well, and he's second guessing himself, then it's like, oh, an adult fighting a kid or stealing from a child. You're like, it's less impressive because obviously an adult can totally beat up and steal candy from a child because the kid is way smaller. So I don't know. I'm like, did it just happen to work out perfectly? Carson's the biggest threat, and he's the worst at fire here.
That just seems like someone was giving Heidi, someone's looking out for Heidi, like upstairs. So
Yeah, literally. So Carson, sort of sad, he's not able to make fire. He said he did it in 3 minutes at home, though. Heidi did it 3 minutes record time here. I'm like, oh, is this foreshadowing? That's sort of sad. But also, it is interesting. Like, okay, he realized he's having struggles with making fire on the island in the first few days of the game. Why not work on it throughout your 26 days out there? Okay, sure, you don't want to show others that you're practicing fire. You don't want to look sketch in front of other people, but if especially when you're getting closer to the end, final 5, 6, why not spend some more time practicing?
yeah, yeah. I wonder how much of it is just like you never expect to have to do the final fire challenge, you know? So, mm. Or maybe
But
he was just always going to be bad at it.
yeah, I'm like, it's sort of really sad. He gets in his head. I feel like that's definitely something. I guess it's normal for young people, old people, but maybe young people especially. I can definitely see like him as a 20-year-old having imposter syndrome out there of like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not as good as these other people. So I can definitely see how that would play a factor in like, yeah, I suck at fire. There's nothing that I can do to fix this. So why even try? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but then you're like, "No, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't practice."
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I would love to hear Carson's thoughts on this, but I don't know if he's talked about it at all in like in post press interview, post exit. You know what I mean.
So, we get this Final Four fire making challenge, and it's funny now because I feel like they put the Final Four fire making challenge to prevent their favorite person from being eliminated right before immunity. Okay, it happened in Ben's season, but they're mad that David Wright got voted out Final Four, so let's put a thing here to prevent that. But now the person that is the biggest threat, maybe the producer fan favorite still, is just going to get eliminated in the final fire making challenge. But you could say, okay, production might be happy because that person has a chance to save themselves. They could win at fire and then they won't be eliminated. But people are smart in the game. They're not going to just say, yeah, let me bring the biggest threat to the end of the game. They're going to send them into fire.
It's also kind of just you're going to push the favorites getting voted out earlier and earlier because they're going to be like, oh, maybe they'll have an idol at 5 and then be able to win at fire at 4. So I'm going to vote them out at 6, you know? And so I feel like it might end up having the opposite effect where instead of keeping someone later, they just try to get out the big threats even earlier so that they don't have to deal with any of this mess.
Exactly. So I feel like we've talked about this every single season. Let's just see a regular final four vote.
Please. Or at least do a different twist.
Yeah, I guess you can make up something else. But we got to final tribal council. I feel like Heidi's responses were very meh. Feels like to me that she sort of kept on sidestepping the questions, low key interrupting other people. Some of the stuff to me just felt a little bit wrong. Like she was saying, oh, we were playing from the bottom at the start of the merge. But I'm like, you came in with 4 strong coming into the merge. Tika were on the bottom. They only had 3 people, but you kept on saying that Tika was on a high. They were riding the wave. But Tico were the ones that came in with low numbers, like Jam Jam was on the chopping block the first 3 votes of the merge.
Yeah, this I don't know. I feel like Heidi was trying really hard to spin a story that would make it so that she would get votes, but her story was kind of incompatible with reality, and Jam Jam sold a better story. And I think also, like you said, I think she had a point she really wanted to drive home, which is like, I'm doing this to inspire other people like me to like want to come out and play Survivor and like know that they are, you know, they're valuable, they're represented and stuff like that. But I feel like that wasn't really what the jury was looking for, because like everyone is playing to inspire other people like them. Like Jam Jam and Carolyn both also like have unique attributes about them, where like Carolyn having been an addict in the past, Jam Jam being like a gay man who's also like Latino, you know, that kind of thing. Where I feel like trying to push like, oh, you should vote me because it would be historic, I would be the first Latina female to win, like isn't actually focusing on your game. And I feel like that was a negative on Heidi's side.
I agree. I'm like, okay, great, bring it up one time. But I feel like continuously in different questions, we hear her bring up different identities and how her winning would be historic. But also, like, Jam Jam winning has broken a lot of records as well. So it's like, yeah, bring it up once. You can talk about the communities that you're representing, the identities that you have. But if you are bringing it up multiple times, I feel like you need to relate it to the game that you played. Like, okay, it would make more sense to connect your identities to how these identities and your background shapes the way that you had to play your game. Like, because of XYZ, because of what I look like, I had to play the game differently from other people because of these identities that I hold. How did my background shape the way that I have to navigate through this game? I think that would be a better storyline rather than just keeping them separate. Like, yeah, I want to represent women in STEM. Like, okay, great. That's awesome. And how does that relate to the game of Survivor? How does you being a woman in STEM relate to the game of Survivor? Bringing up, like, oh, I'm in a male dominated space. So maybe she doesn't get to talk much or people look down on her. So then you could connect that to Survivor. But I feel like with her answers, bringing up the communities and identities that she represents, it just felt so disjointed because she wasn't connecting it to Survivor.
Exactly.
So, Jam Jam, I felt like did a good job with his answers. We talked about it last night. I think Jam Jam does really well where he has the good answer, where it's very serious. He answers the question straight on, unlike Heidi sort of sidestepping the answers. But then he also has that funny personality as well, where if he is saying someone did something bad, like, but then he makes it funny and sort of makes it into a compliment. And so it's really good. I'm like, it's so impressive that you can be pushing someone down, but also building them up. Sort of like they say in like persuasive arguments, you sandwich the bad thing in the middle between two compliments, and then the people won't remember the bad thing in the middle. They won't get offended because they'll just remember your compliment because that came last.
Yeah, so I feel like Jam Jam did a really good job. I feel like in post interviews, Carolyn has said that like she kind of just gave up at this point and she kind of thought that Jam Jam already had the win. And I wish that she hadn't because it seems like Carolyn had a good shot at least getting more than 0 votes. And so I wish that, we had gotten to see more of Carolyn's fight in this final tribal council.
It was interesting to see, like, Carolyn getting roasted for misplaying her idol by the jury, but Heidi didn't really get that same energy that we saw. Maybe she did, but it got edited out. But I thought Carolyn's answer to playing the idol made a lot of sense. Like, yeah, she needed Carson around, she wanted him around. She played the idol so he was there. Okay, he only got 2 votes, it wasn't the majority, but you couldn't tell where these other people are actually going to vote. So it seemed like people really knocked her for misplaying the idol, but I thought the reasoning made sense.
I mean, Jam Jam also kind of went through for her throat when he was
Yeah.
like, "You should have just trusted me and Carson," and I was kind of like, "Whoa, there, dude!" Like, it's not that she didn't trust you and Carson; it's that she didn't trust everyone else. So, yeah,
So, yeah, yeah, we get another 710 vote, which is the fourth 710 vote in the new era. Every single season, 41, 42, 43, and now 44 has ended in a 710 vote. So, this is a problem, I think. It's sort of like, okay, these individual votes don't really matter anymore because everyone is just voting as a big block at the end of the day. And then you get like one friend voting for someone so they get the second place prize money compared to the third place prize money. So like Danny voting for Heidi here, you get second place. You get one vote for second place, but everyone else is going to vote as a big block. Which I'm like, imagine if people voted maybe where they wanted and they weren't persuaded by other people. Maybe you'd have like a 3-3-2 split or something where everyone's vote, you could make it 4-2. It's just more spicy when everyone is not. So let's make it unanimous.
yeah, I don't know. I think this whole thing of like people voting to make sure that like the bad winner doesn't win is kind of stupid because it's like I feel like Carolyn deserved second place more than Heidi deserved second place, but because people didn't want Heidi to win first place, they didn't want to split votes between Jam Jam and Carolyn. And like that seems kind of unfair to me.
Which I think we brought this up last season. Like, should they sequester the jury members? Because we see nowadays jury members are all talking to each other, they're voting with each other, they're sort of planning and being able to communicate and influence how each other's vote. Maybe people were wanting to vote Carolyn. Maybe Franny did want to vote Carolyn, but then hearing everyone else be like pro Jam Jam or pro Heidi, she's like, oh, dang, if I vote Carolyn, I'm sort of wasting my vote because no one else is going to vote for her. Let me just switch my vote to the person that's getting a majority of the votes so I can say that I voted for the winner of Survivor rather than people voting for who they truly wanted to vote for in the first place and not just going where the big majority is and being on the right side of the votes at the end.
Yeah, I don't know because I think it is interesting to see the way that juries can influence each other, but also it is like I said, I don't like that people seem to be voting just to make sure the wrong person doesn't win instead of making sure the person they want to win actually gets their vote, if that makes sense. And like, it's possible that those two people are the same people. Like, maybe you do genuinely think that Jam Jam is the best and that's why you voted for him, but I don't know. I mentioned earlier in this podcast doing like ranked choice voting, and I feel like that would be an interesting way to, like, make sure that the second place person is actually the person who played the second best game and not just the person who like got one pity vote.
Yeah, I think another way to help prevent like basically almost unanimous jury votes. Besides sequestering, I think we need to go back to a final two. Let's get rid of this final three. Let's see a final two because I feel like having a zero vote finalist in these final three scenarios, it just like not fun. You see someone sit there and they're not really talking, you know they're not going to win, so they're not getting screen time. And you're like, what was the point of them even sitting there? Send them to the jury and then we can have more debate between the two people. And sure, in a final two, you can have a unanimous vote as well, like we've seen in the past, where one person gets all of them and you still have a zero vote finalist. But I feel like with this new era and with all of these advantages, we've talked about this so many times. The game really ends at final five because with final four, it's a safety round. And basically, if you have an idol, you can be safe from six onwards and you're in final three. There is no more real votes after final five. Last time to play idols, last time to vote people off, because like Jeff kept on mentioning, fire making challenge doesn't mean you're getting voted out. No one can write your name down anymore. I feel like we need some more real votes at the end of the game to, I don't know, spice it up. You can't just get an idol and you're from five to three.
Yeah. Mm, so I guess we'll have to see if they make any changes. I feel like they're not actually going to change the final four fire just because it's what production likes, which isn't necessarily the same as what, we like.
Would be cool though to see a final two here. Like if the Tika three had to actually turn on each other, that would have been a very, very spicy end game because we've seen the Tika three love each other so much. We never actually had to see them turn on each other because here Heidi was the one to make the play, let's get Carson out and fire. They could all still be buddy buddy. But if they had to go to a final two situation where final four was a vote, final three was a vote, it'd be such good TV.
Yeah, I feel like it would have ended up being that Jam Jam and Carolyn would go against each other because I think they both know they couldn't win against Carson. But then it's kind of like between Jam Jam and Carolyn, would that actually change, the outcome? But I don't know. I feel like a final two is good for some things, not good for other things. I really liked it when like they don't know whether it's going to be a final two
Mhm.
or a final three, but I feel like that's less possible in these 20 like these shorter seasons because then it's kind of like wait, we still have 3 days left and there's 3 of us left. So like obviously there's going to be another vote out. So, yeah.
So Jam Jam wins. We get to the after show. It's an after I feel like we've talked about the negatives of the after show ever since it started in 41 here. Same kind of negative still coming up. I thought it was funny to see Jamie's reaction to the fake idol, but I would have wanted to see more of the reactions rather than just skipping it and cutting to commercial break, then coming back again. Like, I want to hear what they had to say about it, then just, okay, yada yada through it and go on to the next segment.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of stuff where Jeff would like say something, they'd cut to commercial, and he'd be like, "You guys are still talking about that thing we were talking about before we cut to commercial," and it's like, maybe you shouldn't have cut to commercial then. I don't know. I talked a little last night when we were on the Nullified Takes podcast, but I just feel like it's kind of rude to make like the second and third place finishers like immediately have to go into like celebrating and like looking back on their games. It's like they never got any time to have closure, any time to like breathe a little, just because like even if you don't know for sure who won until the finale night, I think a lot of people in modern survivor kind of had an idea of like, oh, I think that I'm like a zero vote finalist, or I think that everyone voted for Jam Jam or something like that. So you kind of have more time to prepare yourself for the possibility of losing, and they just don't get that, and they don't really get a lot of time to recover physically or emotionally. So
Yeah, at least the one good thing is that they know that the after show is happening right after. Compared to season 41, we talked about this so much. Like Deshaun and Xander just look like terrible at after show on their season because they didn't know it was happening, and then you just lost, and maybe you thought you won, and you're tired and you're hungry, and then you have to put on a fake happy for the actual winner of the season. It's just like that'd be so torturous to have to sit through.
Yeah, and like in this reunion, I guess not technically a reunion, but like in this after show, like Franny like gave Carolyn this whole speech about how like, oh, you changed my life by showing me that it was okay to like, you know, be myself. And it's kind of like, okay, Franny, that's cool, but you also didn't vote for me to win $1 million. Like, you saying that you changed your life, maybe that means a lot more to me like 6 months from now when I've had time to process and reflect. But right now it kind of just feels like you're trying to make up for the fact that you didn't like vote to give me $1 million, you know? So
We don't really talk about anything of substance or importance in the after show because it literally just happened. At least, okay, months later in the live show, people had time to reflect. You can ask good questions about what happened on the island. And sure, you can say, oh, yeah, giving people months in between, they're going to change their answers. They see the audience reaction and then they might change their answers based off of what the audience thinks about them for the live reunion show. Sure, but it actually, gives people more time to reflect. So you can have better questions here. Like this after show, they literally talked about nothing.
yeah, and it's kind of like Jeff was like talking about like Franny and Matt's relationship, and it's like they've been together for like 2 weeks, you know?
Yeah, so
And
it's like, okay, cool. If it was a real reunion show, they could say that they're still together, a year later, X number of months later, that it would have been since filming. Last year, they could say, yeah, we've been together for a year and talk about how their relationship has progressed since then. Not here, like, yeah, Ponderosa was fun, Jeff.
yeah, so bring back the live reunion.
Which Jeff says maybe. There's some articles about that out, so maybe we'll see a live reunion, which would be cool to see coming up. Another bad thing about this after show is that they kept cutting to commercials, and then like 30 seconds before each commercial would be a preview for what's going to happen next on the reunion show. And you're like, what the heck? This is a
Right?
45-minute segment. Why are there so many previews for what is coming up in 10 minutes?
Yeah, it's like just show me.
That's so bad. So some records for Jam Jam winning the season. Jam Jam is the first winner and contestant from Puerto Rico to win. Gabler is the only person to win the game in this new era from the United States, with Erica Marianne being from Canada, Jam Jam here being from Puerto Rico. So that's interesting. Jam Jam's the first openly gay winner since Todd, and this is the first time that there's two LGBT plus people to make the final three. Heidi's the first woman to win the fire making challenge against a man since the start of the final four fire making challenge. Just in fire making challenges in general, I think only three women have beat men when the challenge just happens generally. Heidi has a new fire making record, beating Gabler's last season. And this season marks another season where someone on the Met Chat from episode one ends up winning the season. So I feel like with this Matt Chat stuff, they should not have the winner of the season get a Matt Chat next season because for seasons 41, 42, 43, and 44, very similar that they're all 710 votes. All four of these seasons, the person who got a Matt Chat, one of them ended up winning the season.
Yeah, so I feel like it's one of those things where maybe it only seems obvious in hindsight that all four of them got a Matt Chat. I know I said that at the beginning of the season. I was like, it's going to be Franny, Jam Jam, or Matthew. But I feel like they also can't be like, oh, I'm not going to show the winner at a Matt Chat next season just like to spite people who look for that. So I don't know. I feel like they should edit it the way that they want to edit it, and whether or not the winner gets a Matt Chat shouldn't be a point of concern for them.
Sort of one of those like superstition things. It's like, okay, there's never been a winner to have their name first in the title sequence. Adam broke that superstition by being the first person listed when they used to do title sequences. Not anymore nowadays. But when that happened, it's very similar, I feel like, to walking first into the Big Brother house. They're like, yeah, no one has won walking first. So you hold the door open. You don't want to be the first person to step in your group. But technically that has been debunked as well. So it's like, okay, just can't have these superstitions because people are going to look for it.
Yeah, yeah, I guess we'll have to see how that goes.
So, sort of sad now. Season's over. There's nothing to do until August when Big Brother comes back. The Challenge USA comes back in August. I don't think any international Survivor seasons are coming out in the summer. So, we've got a couple months of off season.
Yeah, and we have some really fun videos planned for the off season. But if you guys have anything that you want to see us do on the hiatus, let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for watching this video. Thank you for sticking with us for another season of Survivor. Maybe we're coming up 8 years now, Alyssa. We got to do some math here, which is totally wild that we have been doing it for, I think, since season 31. So that is really, really insane to think about. But let us know in the comments down below your thoughts on this season in general, as well as the winner of the season, this finale episode. We would love to hear it. We'll probably take maybe 2 weeks off in the meantime between now and starting our hiatus content. So thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you all in a few